It is, no, actually it's creepy, you're right, it's creepy. Whenever someone starts talking about the humans, you know it's kind of a problem. In fact, so I came across there's a center at Berkeley called the Greater Good, Science for Advancement of the Great, what is it? The Scientific Center for the Greater Good. Yeah, the greater good. Right, the bad guy always says it's for the greater good. Yeah, whenever someone says, I'm doing it for the greater good, you know they're a psychopath who's trying to destroy the world, right? It's a total giveaway. Anyway, we have a scientific center for that's good. So this is actually Crime and Punishment. It's actually the Russian text, which I found somewhere. So I just took the sequence of words as a time series, right? With a kind of a rough way of chopping it up, I guess. It's not perfect. And then for each word for which we have a happiness score, as rated by Russians, because we have about 10 languages rated by people, the words. So we have about 10,000 words in each language. So there's Portuguese, which is really Brazil, Spanish, etc. We have Korean, Chinese. Anyway, so it's the Russian, and so I replaced every word with its happiness score, this average score for each word, and then a -1 if it wasn't in there, and then this is a smoothing of this. So this is these are the negative words. These are words that are on the negative side, and this is their smoothed version of them. So the next step is to see if this makes sense with the narrative of the story, right? So I should be able to get at the chapters. I did Don Quixote and Anna Karenina, which is not how you would say it, right? But Karenin, yeah.
What's the x-axis?
So this is actually just simply the number of words into the text.
Oh, I see.
Right? So this is just, yeah, and this is just smoothing, so you can smooth it some more and so on. But it looks, So I have 4 different smoothings, 3,000 words, 10,000 words. No, 1,000, 3,000, 10,000, and 30,000. So I think this one is 10, or maybe 3,000 words. So you take the first 3,000 words, get the average score, and then slide that across.
Okay.
And you just ignore ones for which you don't have a score.
3,001 would be the next one. Yeah.
Yep.
So is that happiness or unhappiness?
This is the negative. These are bad. So the lower this, the more negative it is.
And what book was that?
There's no way I'm going to get through anything today. This is Crime and Punishment, yeah. And it is, so it's the original Russian, right? So we can also, I don't have that yet, but this is the translation. This is using different lenses. We have different kinds of lenses, which is a bit of a funny thing to say, but we can actually, the way the words work here is we can, so this is showing you using different lenses, like changing the color of your lens on a scope of some sort, you get the same kind of shapes here, right? Yeah, it's changing the stop words. It's changing which words you're including in your list. And so in a principled way. So there's again this kind of robustness we've seen in other languages. It's extremely robust actually. So this is Anna Karenina. This is a smoothing of, let's make it, so 10,000. It's a smoothing of 10,000. So it has this kind of structure. So I don't know about that story. Of course it has the famous opening line, which is, right, happy families are happy all in the same way. I haven't said it right. But sad families are sad in their own special ways, right? Which is, Jared Diamond uses that as the, what does he call it? I think he calls the Anna Karenina principle. I think it's called that, to explain, this is his guns, germs, and steel story, which, not everyone agrees with us, but the idea that you have to have, for things to flourish, you have to have everything right? So if you want your civilization to take off, and this is true of video games as well, where you're playing you're actually playing civilization, you have to have everything lined up. You have to have a crop that you can be cultivated, some animals that can be turned into, right? You have to have all these things lined up. So the middle of Australia, tough place to do those things. That's his argument. Anyway, but it's that principle. So there's that one, there's Don Quixote, so I have Moby Dick lined up. Boop, boop, boop. So these are taking, so for instance, this is taking all the negative words, is it taking positive words and looking at how they have very similar patterns. So if you just look at the words that are above neutral in terms of emotion, and then so replace every word by its score, and just ignore the words that don't have scores, right? So they're not part of it, right? So for whatever, my parser didn't work very well, or there are words that simply aren't in this list of ours. So there's a drop, and then it grows, and this seems to be, so the question is, it's a lot of work to go, right? But
Did you see the analysis of the Hunger Games and Harry Potter? And it was something
the
like
storyline?
frequently occurring words in the books.
Oh,
It had three of the major, Twilight, Hunger Games, and Harry Potter. And you could see how they're different. I think it's Atlantic City's article. Came out.
no, I haven't seen that. I'd love to see it.
Different or the same?
They are different.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah.
Okay, but they get a texture that seems to be
Yeah.
reasonable?
Yeah.
Okay, I want to see that. That's great. I want to see that. So this is just a very rough sketch of what will one day be a nice map of this course. But this is just something I doodled basically on a napkin, actually a piece of paper. But so we started off here. We had the golden age of reduction story, and then this manifesto. So somehow I'll have some nice little doodad for that. And then we wandered through the. If you've looked at the Twitter feed, you would have seen this ridiculous thing. Okay, good. All right. So the normal distributions, we talked about that a little bit, right? So this is the statistics of boredom. So these are what do I call these? What do I call these? The snormals. The snormals. These are the snormals, right? And I have these pictures of them, right? So this will be the idea, right? There'll be postcards of various places, right? Right? Mount whatever, Mount meh, Mount who cares, Mount quite boring. The snow line, see, is actually kind of uniform. Okay, so we visited the snormals. Image magic, you can kind of do anything. So, we just write some scripts, and then you're making Polaroids. It's awesome. Yes, Mount Financial Collapse. So these were the interesting mountain range, right? And this was sort of an idea, right? Yeah. And Mount almost every day is in here. So you're like, oh, little mountain, little mountain, little mountain, and then, oh my God. And then we talked about random walks for a little bit. So that's the random road, right? That's this little piece here. So there'll be some different things there. So I guess, all right, so we have figures for those. So this is going to take some time. So the unexpected mountains of reality. That's where we traveled to. This is the random road through the forests of forgettable events. So it's just it's a bit Charlie Brown-like, that kind of structure. And then we talked about this a little bit, but these are the kind, this is one way to get to these mountains of surprise, right? So this is this universality story, which I want to touch on again in this last lecture, which somehow is just this isolated last lecture of madness, right, after Thanksgiving. So trees of unusual size. No?
Huge component.
That's true, right? But this is a reference to, yes, Princess Bride, which is very important. Rodents of unusual size. Okay, so the trees of unusual size, right? So these are different. I've some Easter eggs for you. All right. So this is one way. So if you have these kind of fractal Brownian motion things and you sample from them, then you end up with these distributions. You see the house, there was a little house in the other one, now it's stretched and weird. So this is the road of surprises through the disconcerting woods. This is one way to get to those mountains, right? And we talked about many different routes, if you like. That's kind of what we need to say here. There are routes to chaos, and we kind of ended up with 3 of those. But the routes to producing these power law size distributions are incredibly varied, and it's a great problem. And the ones that we highlighted were the rich gets richer type thing. So there's going to be some little postcard for that guy as well. But rich gets richer, and then so that was one big example. This is Snortum. This is surprise. Okay, so mechanisms leading to laws of power and others. That's what's going to go in there. And then we went through the Death Star situation. There's going to be a Death Star picture. Then the complex network. So we have small worlds, scale free. We went back and visited the rich gets richer thing. So it's got to have some little path like that. Zombies, spreading and contagion, horrible diseases. We talked about success and fame. There should be this thing scaling in here that just needs to fit in there. And I'll talk about it a little bit today, but we've run out of it, and we'll have some picture for that. And then this is the piece where we end complexification, right? So, okay. So this will be a good map eventually, but it's about sorting knowledge out and sorting out how things work. So I need some way to, some way to display this thing. Oop. Okay. The roboctopus should be involved, the 8-fold way of the roboctopus. Okay. That's probably enough madness there. All right, okay, good. So I want to talk a little bit about scaling. We have an hour to go, so I'll just sort of mess around in these slides for a little bit, and then I want to have this complexification piece that we'll finish up with, and that should be it. Okay. Good. All right. Okay, so we had this great example of scaling, right? So if you find systems that have scaling them, this is different to the big piece we had at the start about power law size distributions. This is now about scaling. It's looking across systems. Here we're looking across organisms. So the biology has been constrained, right? The brains that biology has produced, the algorithm of evolution has produced, have this strong constraint on the structure of these things inside our heads. We're not special in this case. So this is the gray matter versus white matter. This is computation versus wiring units. Okay, so we looked at that. That's a good thing to come back to. And there are some complications. We don't need to talk about that. We've gone over this sort of thing, but high quality, if you've got 3 or more orders of scaling in each direction now, because now it's not a probability versus size, right? Now we have 2 different things we're measuring about systems, right? Gray and white matter volume. Tricky things can happen when you have volume versus length, for example. So you're getting a bonus of, right, a power of 3 floating around with the volume. If it was length scale, then everything would shorten up. So that's a little sneaky. Okay. That's a good way to get more orders of magnitude. Okay, so this is not bad. Not bad if you get 3 orders of magnitude in 1 dimension. Maybe that works, but very dubious. And we've touched on a few of these, like the walking speed one and some others. Okay, good. Scandalous behavior. Here it is. Okay, in fact I have it. So, right. Okay, so I'm punishing them even further. Okay, that's unnecessary. All right. Okay, so you see all this business in chaos and fractals when you go through fractals, but we're going to talk about much more than just geometric shapes here. Again, this is something I'm just touching on. So basically the story, though, is it's about objects that look the same across scales when they're appropriately rescaled, right? So it's not just, there's isometry, and I'll mention that, and then there's this thing called allometry. It's a different framing. And in the kind of old fractal speak, it would be affine transformations would be the words people would use. Okay, but there could be all sorts of things. The shapes, of course, this is Mandelbrot. So Mandelbrot, Benoit B. Mandelbrot, right? The B stands for Benoit. Okay, very funny. The B stands for Benoit B. Mandelbrot. Okay, yeah. Okay, so joke number 1. The other thing is we went to see, I have 2 people, so we went to see Frozen, which is quite good. Well done. Yeah. Solid, good. It has and I like animation a lot. So, but they said fractals in one of their songs about snow. Oh my God. So there's a Disney movie now where they say fractal something, which is just kind of extraordinary. Anyway, so I don't know. That was weird to me. Yeah. Well, I mean, snowflakes are quite excellent fractals. Yeah. I mean, paragons. So it was all fine. Yeah. But anyway. Yeah, like Colbert just said something about all those pictures of him going back and back. It was a Mebius strip, but it's just, what are you talking about? They were reaching into math and rummaging around for a word and like, let's use Mebius. Yeah, they wanted something else there. Anyway, so the same might be statistically the same, and that's very true of, say, things like time series. So you see this for all sorts of different time series, financial time series, heartbeat time series, those sorts of things. Maybe books, we'll see, where you blow part of it up and statistically it's similar looking. All sorts of things. All right, so we're going to rescale things in some way. It's a last lecture, so we don't need to hurt ourselves too much, but this is basically the story, right? So we have x, we're going to rescale 1 dimension, we're going to replace it with r times x prime, so this is as simple as changing something from meters to yards or something like that. And we need to rescale another aspect of the system or the set of systems we're looking at with maybe r to some power, so that the things all look the same. So that's going to work in this case, right? So we have
converting into cubic yards or something like that.
Yeah, well, it could be that, so you could have a set of shapes where the width of them in some, whatever, how you measure this, like the width versus the height. Let's say we've got trees. And we'll have some examples. Let's say we've got trees, and maybe trees get, I think I've got this wrong. If trees get, as they get bigger, they tend to get broader, I think, faster, right? So the trunk is, So that might be, so say the width of them is scaling like, I want to say, so mass to the 3/8, right? So 3/8 power, and a quarter power for the height. So, and then there's a connection. And we'll have an example, we'll show that. So that might be one example, yeah. So it's not just, yep. Yeah, so it's a little more than just changing units. I shouldn't say it like that. Okay. But maybe that's what you want to do here, and you've got something else going on here. All right, so, all right, this is just a little calculation, but saying if we put our x prime in here with our right thing, we get r to the minus alpha in there, things clear up. And we get the same relationship, right? So if we have this connection between them, y is some constant times x to the alpha, and we rescale x and y appropriately, we get the same story. Okay, so that's the idea. We're going to zoom out or zoom in and see that things don't change. So as if we look through this selection of brains, and we're looking through them in a funny way, we're looking at the graph essentially of white matter and gray matter. If we zoom through these brains in the right way, then the little brains scale up to look like the big brains. Okay, but we don't just simply scale up the white matter. If we 10 times the white matter, we don't just make the gray matter 10 times as much and say that's what we'll see in an organism that's 10 times as big. You don't see it. Which, and so that's a simple thing, but it's very important for things like, all sorts of reasons. There's basic science, but things like drugs, all sorts of stuff, right? If you're doing things with mice and you want to put it into humans, then you have to think about how things scale, and it's often not trivial. Okay, that's just, it doesn't work for the exponential, fine, right. So allometry is this kind of story, right? So first of all, isometry is simply that you do this thing where you just scale up each dimension in the same way, fine. Right? Little things look just like big things, you just put them through a microscope and you see the same thing. But allometry, so this is, and I have these words here, so allo is other, so there's some, iso is same, right? So they're not scaling in the same way. So this is this kind of example, right? So you'll have to, when you scale a thing, you have to squish one of the dimensions, or maybe 3 or 4 of the dimensions, depending on how many you have at different rates to get things to look the same. So it's this, differential growth of parts of, it comes from biology actually, and it's first from Huxley, and I don't know how you say it, CCA, but it was Nature 1936. It's just a little paper that says, we keep calling these things different things, let's call it allometry. So now you'll see this talked about a lot, particularly in biology, but now we have cities, for example, and lots of other different realms. I have to say, this is kind of incredible. The paper, I was looking through Nature to kind of find this thing, and you bring up Nature, and you look at the table of contents. The paper before it is about eugenics, right? It's just unbelievable. It's like, better ways to do it, right? Yes. Proud of ourselves. All right, we're evolving very, very slowly, and sometimes the wrong way. Okay, so same measure, other measure. We say lots of different things. It can be that we talk about allometry when we have an independent variable x and a dependent one. We could have that kind of situation, or something where they're not. They're codependent, right? That's not an obvious story there. All right, you'll just see the word used in different ways. All right, lots of examples. This is now 30 years old, but it's there's a series of these Scientific American books. They're coffee table books, and I have it in my office. So I scraped a few pieces out of it. It's quite a beautiful thing. But it lays out at least in the start for biology, but for many different systems, size variation, right? So this is a fun thing to look at, right? So these are the largest of various kinds of classes of things. So this is So the giraffe is there because it's the tallest living animal now. But, and maybe, was it always? Sorry, living, so there's all these things. So it's a land, right. Yeah, so the blue whale is easily the biggest thing, right? It's huge. I once took my eldest one out and we measured, whatever it's 30, 35 meters out. This is a whale. I mean, they're crazily large. So it's always a bit of a problem for the dinosaur people because they have to say, the dinosaur, this dinosaur is the biggest land thing, right?
Biggest non-whale.
Yeah. They always have to stop just short of saying it's the biggest thing ever. Well, the whale people are like, no, it's not. Right? Someone finds a bit of a femur somewhere and they're like, this is the Massivosaurus or something. That is pretty bad for me personally. The largest extinct snake, which is good. Good story there. These are all accurate things, and there should be a scale, but there's not a scale. Maybe I cut it off. We have good guys. There's a squid down here. That must be the largest fish. It's a whale shark. Yeah, right. 12. This is extinct. This is I think that's the. Who knows what the Epionus is? This guy. Because there's the mammoth. What was it called? The mammoth bird, which was on Madagascar, which was the heaviest, but not the tallest, right? That's the moa on New Zealand, right? So lots of crazy animals here. This guy was obviously huge. The Balacatherium. So this is representative human here. Anyway, that one is not around, and this is the sequoia. So this is the biggest tree we have, and it's got this is 100. Well, this is 100 foot. Okay, so this is 100 feet this way.
She wanted that tapeworm was in the whale.
Really? In a human.
How?
Longest tapeworm found in man. And it's almost as long.
It's just nasty. Yeah.
That's just what, like 4 school buses long, right? That is really disturbing.
Space filling. A space filling tapeworm.
So it must have been.
It must have been the whole wow. Hold still. Yeah, there's nothing wrong. Just look at the ceiling. Yeah.
Great.
All right, I'm gonna get a tape measure here.
How much
Okay.
do you need
Maybe
to
another
keep
one.
a tapeworm?
Bring everyone in. Bring everyone in.
Like, how much must you eat to keep a tapeworm that big?
A lot. Yeah, you get pretty hungry when you've got some tapeworms going on.
You're almost feeding a whale.
Yeah. Well, volume wise, not
That's true, right? Allometry doesn't scale.
one-dimensional.
You're right. It's a one-dimensional whale. Yeah, that's good. This is the lion's mane, I think. I think it is. It's under the Antarctic, the Arctic. I believe that's where. It might be all over the place, but it's. Yeah. Disconnect from you, UVM.
They are so scary.
What's that? Jellyfish?
No, I was just
But I mean, imagine this thing.
No,
You're in your mini sub under the Antarctic trying to be a super spy. And
I meant the horse because I'm like very afraid of horses.
okay,
But it's
they're kind of
so
crazy
small.
horses. That's true. That does,
They're just enormous and they scare the living.
by comparison. You could have horse versus crap.
That would be a lot shorter, right?
And this is the West African crocodile, but this is why, so Australia has a few of those up around here, and that's usually 1 person, 2 people a year, drunk on a boat. There are some exceptions, but it's usually drunk on a boat plus crocodile. They're very lazy. Basically, you just have to serve yourself to them because they won't come after you unless you really, annoy them. But they just wait, and then you walk essentially into their mouth. Yeah.
So about a week ago, less than a week ago, 2 men saved a shark from choking on a moose.
Who put that? How did those things get near each other? What was the moose doing? This is in the.
Newfoundland men saved a shark from choking on a moose. He was driving by.
What about the moose?
Thought he saw a beached whale. Went closer to investigate. It was a Greenland shark, and it was choking.
Did you save the moose, or was the moose an ex-moose?
The moose had the fur and all the liner on it. It was about 2 feet long. Small moose.
The mini Newfoundland moose.
Are you sure that was
All right. There was, oh, excellent, sheep. It just says sheep. I'm not sure why it's there. The biggest living things, sheep.
Nice comparison.
That's a
Horse
big,
just
this
says
is a
horse.
big, this is a big lizard. That must be the Komodo dragon. Yeah, right. That is a, which has got some nice poisonous stuff going on as well, right? Like don't lick Komodo, for various reasons, do not lick Komodo.
Don't you like pass out when you get close to them?
Yeah, I know, we're
They're
in a,
just terrified.
yeah, we're in a zoo. They're pretty, sloppy looking things, but yeah. These are, so this is medium-sized creatures, right? So you go to the next page, medium-sized creatures.
Average sized dog.
Random dog, This is, so that's the egg from, so that's, right, so that's the mammoth bird. That's a big egg, because that's a dog, and that's an egg.
Wait. Oh, okay.
There, so not around Madagascar. Yeah, it was a big, just huge bird. Struthius, not so much. Yeah, okay, hen.
And then they've got the smallest.
I mean, that's a big egg. Yeah.
That's the smallest egg too. Smallest
And that's a tropical frog. There you go, the smallest vertebrate.
Koki.
This is the smallest thing with a backbone, this guy.
Koki.
Koki? Okay. Well, shrews are very small. Is this a shrew? No, that's a house mouse. What's the small, what about that? Yeah, flying shrew. They just the wind just takes them. They're like 3 or 4 grams, yeah. All right, so we've got these guys. That is disturbing. Okay. These are things you can see, right? So this is a small naked eye thing. So this is blowing them up on the left. So we've got some good guys in there, fleas and so on. So you can see all these things. And I think this connects back, right? So this is the smallest vertebrate, right? That's you, this guy. Which one?
Koki.
Koki? Is that an individual? Oh, yeah. That's the name.
It's the name.
Okay.
It's on the neck too.
Oh, okay. That's good. Yeah, so these guys. And then, okay, all right. So that's fun. But, and I'll show you some more things. They have some fun things.
There's also online an app called The Scale of the Universe.
Oh, where you can go in and out like that? Yeah. That's a nice thing. There's a video from years ago. But the app would be
The
well done.
screen's quite well.
Yeah.
Because you can go all the way to the Planck scale and up to the observable.
Outside the, yeah. Feel very small.
Yeah, especially when you realize what size is the sun and then the largest, the star.
Right, XKCD just had a thing. Let me show you that. There's a good Monty Python song about how small we are, by the way. I think it's factually correct about where we're sitting in the universe. This is, I think, relevant to the day, which doesn't really matter. It's a day of irrelevance. Yeah, so these are, it's a beautiful day in the neighborhood, right? So it's, I don't know if you can read it, so it's a portrait of, there you go, habitable zone planets within 60 years of Earth. So these are planets around sun-like stars, and we're excited because we can't get away from the whole Earth idea. I mean, we're going to find all sorts of crazy things, I think. And this is planets around other guys. Does that, what did I do to it? Oh, large, it went to large. Yeah. Okay, cool. So the lighter colors are sun-like. This red is the good guys, sort of. And then the ones that are kind of the right size are these little guys here. Yeah. So we should be able to find some algorithms running around out there, I think, is really the story. Okay, cool. All right. We're very small. Okay, so this is an interesting thing. Number of different types of cells actually goes up with organisms, but clearly, so there's a whale here. Someone apparently counted the number of distinct cell types. Right, a great problem of in biology, trying to understand that differentiation process. What's that?
Seems like quite an undertaking.
Well, and it's true in the end. So it's about 100. So this is probably an estimate, I'm sure. So mammals are all in here, right? Sequoia. So there are many scales here, though. This is 10 to the 17 at the top, and it's hard to read, but it's 10 to the 6 on the bottom. So there's that's approximate number of cells. All right, so there's 11 orders of magnitude in terms of number of cells, and a similar kind of story. Well, volume is a different business. Yeah. But as I said, a little bit of cheating with the volume thing. 7, 8, 9.
like
Yeah.
Liver cell, heart cell, brain
Yeah.
cell.
Yeah. And so, one cell.
They're missing a lot of the variation.
Oh, this is only a few points. Yeah, so in here,
Complexity, but
Yeah.
we're a little bit lower volume.
I guess that's a lot of cell sizes. Or
Right.
sizes.
So-
Cell sizes.
so, right. Yeah, this is one mushroom. Yeah. So there's an increase, and this only goes up to 100, so very small range here. But there is some. What's interesting, really, is that you go up through so many there's an enormous range of size, basically, and you do get more cell types to somehow make these things function. These things that are larger need more to function, typically. But you're right, there's going to be a lot of scatter. But it's not a crazy number. Mammals are all built out of the same kinds of cells, which is a really interesting problem. Like, how do mammal cells know they're inside an elephant versus a mouse? And they're similar kind of structures. They're not bigger or smaller or anything, but they function in different ways. They run slower in the bigger guys than the little ones, which is a topic we didn't get to. So this is another allometric scaling kind of story. So this would be very disturbing if a baby walked in and was this big. We're totally fine with the little ones, that's all right. We react in a good, keep the species going kind of way when we see babies usually. But this is not good if they're that big. So there's a growth rate story there. So, for example, this is body height versus arm length, and so the head is massive to start with, right? And so then the growth has to change in different ways. Eventually, it becomes this is a slope 1, so these are log scales. So arm length and body height are starting to grow isometrically, and this is after an older age, so meter tall. But to start with, and there are not so many data points, but the idea is that the rest of your body has to catch up to your giant noggin, which got off to a bit of a strong start. You can't even hold the thing up to start with. Useless, right? Right? Horses, these terrible things, they hit the ground running, essentially. And so do most of our conceptions of aliens, right? They just kind of come out of some goo and they're full of teeth. Yeah. Humans, not so much, right? Lots of other kinds of scaling. So this is 83. This is actually one of the little problems that were sitting in the very, very, very optional assignments. This is the body weight of people versus the world record weight that they've lifted, right? So, and this scaling through here is mass to the 2/3, and so the argument is that it's cross-sectional, right? So if these people are roughly kind of isometric, you scale up body lifters so that they're similar shapes, then their cross-sectional area is scaling as a 2/3 power, right? Because their length dimensions, depth and width and height, are scaling as a 1/3 power, and so a cross-section is growing as 2/3. So that's a muscle cross-section. That's the little simple argument. There are lots of this book is full of crazy things. So this is a really, really extreme and madness kind of thing. So this is the length of the skull down here, and then the horn length for various organisms, and then there's a claim that scaling is to the power of a 4th, which is pretty shaky. But someone took the time to plot all these points and measure and so on. Yeah. So maybe we don't have many ranges of right. There's not much range here, but there's a huge range in horns, and it's for a particular set of organisms. This is engines, right? So this is horsepower, RPM of how they run, right? Various things, crossovers and so on. Right? I mean, there are different kinds of engines and so on. There are different structures behind them, and I don't have the little thing that goes with it, but there's still there's a sort of an overall envelope into which they have to fit. Nails, I mentioned these before, so a little calculation we can quickly look at. So the slope for these guys, so these are nails that have been made, not from a formula, but by people making nails over a long period of time. That whole Metal Ages and so on, where they figured out how to do this. But it seems that diameter grows as length of the 2/3, and so this is, I know it's hard to read on this, this is an 800 by 600, terrible projection. So this is nail length and nail diameter, and these are natural nails, and there are different kinds of nails that are listed here. I can't even read on this, but different types, standardized, different types of nails. So that would be a slope of 1. So if you had isometrically growing nail shapes, that would be 1. So it's a 2/3 thing. So diameter is scaling as length to the 2/3. So you can figure some bits out. Well, let's just see what that means in terms of how they scale with respect to volume. So length times diameter squared has to scale as volume. Okay. And we have, so that gives us this, right? Because, did I write it down? Yeah. All right, so if length, this is the observation, is diameter is proportional to length. I always get confused about this, I have to admit. Like this, so, and you have diameter squared times length must be proportional to volume. So given these two things, so you can stick in, if you like, you can replace D with its scaling in terms of L, so that must be proportional to D to the 2/3, sorry, L to the 2/3 squared times L, right? So that's this guy, and that's this guy. So this is L to the 4/3 plus 3/3, so it's L to the 7/3 is proportional to volume. So that gives you length is proportional to volume to the 3/7, which I have here. And the diameter has to fit together so that this squared plus this, so this would give you 4/7, blah, blah, blah. Okay, fine. Figure it out. So it's sort of a funny scaling. It's a funny scaling. And there's an argument for it that they give, and it comes from some little engineering result. So which you can look this up. Columns will buckle under a load which depends on the diameters, right? So the load increases as diameter to the power of 4, right? So it's thicker and thicker. Your column gets thicker and thicker, then you get a lot of return to scale. So this is surface area squared, if you like, but making it taller is worse, right? Okay, so that's going to hurt you as a 1/length squared. And then the little nice little story is that you're hammering these things in, and what you don't want to happen is for them to buckle, right? So that's a feature that you want to iron out if you can. You don't want to waste too much stuff as well, so that's another thing working against that. So you want to make it thick enough that it will function, but not use. And of course, the length of the thing is something that's given, right? You want to make nails this long, so how thick should you make them? So the thing that's pushing you to make them thinner is just cost, and the thing that's pushing you to make them thicker is functionality, right? So the idea is the resistance is proportional to the circumference, right? That's the idea. But not how far it's pushed in. That's a bit of a tricky piece, okay? So there's an argument they give for that. So if this is, these pieces you have to get to and believe. If this is true, then you can match these guys, right? Because it's right at that edge of buckling. So d to the 4/L squared. So, it's a bit of a cute thing. So then we have d cubed is proportional to L squared, if you bring that over. And that gives you d is proportional to L to the 2/3. Okay, little just so story, which you may or may not believe.
Just one question. Why do you do d to the 4/L squared supposed to be squared around? Just lose the calculation or not?
So say that again. What?
D to the 4.
For this bit here? Yeah, so it does actually grow like that. So this is the load.
Yeah, but I'm saying isn't that equivalent to d squared over L?
The square root of the load is.
Yeah, the load is actually growing like this. The load is, so you can play with this, but the load is really growing like d to the 4th on the top and L squared on the bottom. Right, so you've got all these columns and they have different heights, and you're interested in, and you find when they blow up, different widths and all sorts of things, and you plot, right? You test them because you're a mad engineer. You test them all, and you plot them, and you get this. If you did this experimentally, you get this kind of relationship. You make them all the same height and all these different lengths, and find the force at which, the load at which it goes pop. But you can, you can get to this analytically. Right? Okay, so that's so actually Galileo put this together. This is an old thing, kind of a fun thing. Euler as well. So these are links to things. Did he? You mean just because that was not the sort of thing he would do?
It doesn't seem like those are, that driving forces. Like
He didn't talk about this. I think he talked about buckling of columns.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And there's more about this. So part of this is in the book, but it's McMahon has a nice paper. It's called Size and Shape in Biology. That's 1973. Appeared in Science. So that's sort of a distillation of some of this. Yeah. Cool. Okay. So it's a fun little thing. Lots of other things. So this is rowing. This is ridiculous. This is speed. Of world record speed proportional to the number of rows to the power of a ninth. And there's a little argument for that. That's another question that I put in your extra stuff. So these are some results, and so you have the heavyweight. So you've got 8 people lightweight, which is so there's some problems with that, but they seem to go similar. Actually, no, they didn't. They haven't registered. So this, whether you have a Cox or not, that's an issue as well, right? Okay, fun. Which is a very shallow scaling. But it's to do with the resistance in the water of the shell and how the shells grow as a function of the number of people in them and power that individuals can put out. So it's a pretty bad return. You get faster, but it's really, it's certainly not growing, linearly, which you might sort of just guess to start with. I mean, you start there and you think, all right, well, it's not going to be super linear, it's sublinear perhaps in some way, but this is pretty bad. So this book is full of these things. It's a lot of fun. We've seen zip, lots of other things. This is one we've talked about, and a couple of you are working on this. So that's just the city scaling. We've seen some of this presented. It's just in these slides. The agglomerations, yeah, all right. Some more fun here. This is Moore's law, right? So this is the transistor count on chips. And so there's a doubling. There's different ways to interpret this, and let's see if we can interpret that. But Moore's law appears around here, I think, pretty early on as an idea, and then we're just sort of entrained into our consciousness. So we invent new universes so it can happen, basically. Like we transition into different.
We set up our engineering departments to do exactly this.
Yeah.
Because that's what we're supposed to
We
do.
believe, yeah.
And we don't push beyond that because that's what everybody expects. So
That's a good question, yeah. That's a good question. I don't know. It's just a Moore's law is this. It's the idea that, well, there are different ways to frame it, but this is one variation. So it was roughly, I think there are different things to start with. It was the number of transistors on a chip would double every 18 months, I think. It was adjusted. Maybe he said something different to start with and then changed.
Double every year and a half.
Yeah, okay. So it's to do with cost, and there's a paper that came out recently which is good fun to look through. So it connects a bunch of laws that have been floating around, and one of them is this Moore's law. Frame it in a slightly different way. Part of making those things smaller is a cost thing as well, right? So this is these are I've tried to connect these parameters. So this is the stuff that the unit cost of the stuff, whatever it is. This is the total amount that's being made in the world, right? So price is going down, things are being increased more, produced more if we really like them. So there are, all right, so a number of these laws. So Wright's law, so things are being made more, the cost of them goes down, right? There's just more of them out there, they're cheaper. There's a connection between these two things. Obviously there are more pieces, which we'll add, but and it decays as a power law, right? So I've got it. Well, originally it was 2 years, it's 18 months, I guess is the thing. Let's see, so you can frame this as a cost decrease as well. It's an exponential decrease though, right? So this is the cost of stuff as a function of time, going down exponentially. And so there's a parameter here, m, which is really the piece in here, and then there's some exponent here, w. M for more and w for right. And then there's a observation. This is from a few years. When was this done? Well, can't remember offhand, but it is, oh, okay, 1979, yep. That these things connect, so if production is growing, right, this is cost, this is a cost decrease, and this is if stuff is being produced exponentially, then you can connect them together, right? Okay, yeah. So I don't know if we'll call that Sahal's law, but if you put these two guys together, then you get, if you put Sahal's observation about exponential growth of stuff and Moore's law, then you'll get Wright's law back, okay. Yeah. Yeah, right? Right, so you could raise this one to the power of, let's raise this one to the power of m over g. We get that? Yeah, and then we want the negative of the thing. Oh, okay. Yep, okay. Yep, okay, so you raise this to the power of minus m over g. Then you'll have this guy, so y of t is this, the minus m over g, so it's w is m over g. Right. Okay, so there's a connection between these two things. So this is this is an observation of these, right? This is a number of statements of based on empirical observations that you could come up with, and they're connected together, which is nice. You could try to come up with a reason for them that's deeper, perhaps. We don't have that. So these are they produce a paper full of all sorts of things. So this is. Do you say DRAM, actually? I don't even know what you say. DRAM? Right, PVC, magnesium. Okay, so this is price on the left. Right, so it's going down, and this is exponential, and then this is the production going up exponentially as well. Various connections. So there's I think they have 70 to 80, 62 data sets. Yeah. And they fit everything, right? So this is the W they measure from Wright's law and m over g measuring those two other pieces separately. And they might not all be connected, but this is pretty good. And so very different industries. And this is a perfect system story. This is really fantastic, Chemical is in black, and I guess hardware, there's only a few things in there. Lots of energy stuff. And maybe there's a story here too that the energy is down here a little more and chemicals further up, other and so on. Okay, so that's good stuff. There are other things in here, and this must be connected. There are learning scaling laws, right? So that something is being repeated, and this applies to all sorts of things. So companies getting better at making things. It applies to terrorists getting better at producing IEDs. The time scale between the production of the next one, whatever it is, decreases, and there's a power law story in there as well, and so that seems to have. So I probably should put that in somewhere.
And is singularity in there too?
The singularity.
Yeah, have you heard about that?
Oh, what's his name? Yeah. But yeah. There could be an element of people wanting that to happen as soon as possible because their time is running out, which kind of makes sense. Some people turn to God, others turn to let's have a technological singularity because I want to put my body into a robot. The singularity is actually something that's in here is in this learning kind of boom and bust story. It's actually in one of the cities papers. There's an idea of it where innovation is going so fast that things kind of explode eventually. It's okay. It's okay. What's that?
We expect to see needs.
that things slow down eventually. Yeah, right. Yeah, I don't know. There must be an estimate for this, right?
It's nice that.
There's that whole the Planck length and those sorts of little, yeah. Quantum computing is going to do something. We can make that happen. I don't know. I mean, actually, I don't know. I don't know where. I mean, it must be theoretical. Yeah. Magic quantum computing. Okay, so that's fun. This is a fun one. This is scaling of specialization. I really like this paper. So, great title. Nervous systems. So scaling of differentiation in networks. So this is like the differentiation for cells for organisms, right? We saw about 100, or an estimate of 100 for the whale and mammals in general, presumably. 1 for single cell, right? So how many different types of agents do you need to make up some whole, some system, right? And whether it's the military, organization, rock band, you need some replaceable drummers, you know, right?
Amplifiers that go through level.
Right. Oh, it's really fun. Yeah, all that stuff, right. He choked on his vomit. Actually, we're not sure whose vomit it was. But the specialization, right? So we know about this. And then, so a nice question then is, how, for different kinds of systems that have representatives across many scales, how many different kinds of parts do they have, right? So this is Lego kits. This is actually Lego kits, right? So this is the number of pieces in the kit, in the Lego set, and this is the number of different types. It's changing, of course, because there are more specialized pieces in there now. But it has, and so there are all these exponents measured throughout. This is a 0.7 scaling, so it's growing sublinearly, right? But still, not so bad. So Legos, of course, made by humans. There's a nice little write-up here, 2012. That's a fun one. By Arbesman, yeah, good. And this is the same thing. This is just plotted on this is log 10 here, and this is just the number to show you that it's fun. What'd they do? Okay, they didn't take the log on. That's a bit funny. Yeah, it's Changizi. Okay, so the number of node types, so the number of distinct pieces grows like n to the 1 over d. We have network size, right? So how big is the thing? And then this idea of combinatorial degree, right? So low d, right? So if the number of parts is kind of growing rapidly, right? So if it's 1, d is 1, then bigger and bigger systems, you're just growing different. You have different parts, right? 1,000 pieces, 1,000 different parts. They're all distinct. But if it's a high number, then it's there's a lot of combinatorial stuff going on, right? So you're reusing pieces in different ways. So early Lego kits are like that, and so ant colonies are like that. And the claim they have is that natural selection produces these high D ones. It's very, just by necessity, somewhat, right? And that we tend to not do that, right? We eventually tend to produce all sorts of specialized ones. They have a nice table, lots of different things, right? So it's electronic circuits, Legos, these are businesses, universities, ant colonies, organisms, neurocortex, this sort of thing. And their combinatorial degree is over here. So ant colonies have got 8 up here, so this is pretty high. 17 for the this is cells. This is the cells in organisms. So that's like that plot we had before. The neurocortex. And this is cities down here. This is something to do with businesses in cities. Right. So they're not all networks necessarily, they're systems, but that's good fun. Okay, so okay, that's enough. There's all sorts of stuff in this set of slides on scaling, but I think that's a good little piece. You can come back to it if you want to talk about it some more. Okay, so I'm just going to scoot through this thing, and that will be the end of our course. I just have a few pieces at the end, just some fun stuff, but it wraps things up a little. Okay, so one of the big stories we've had over and over is this idea of universality, right? So that You've got evolution, you've got stars forming, you've got all this sort of stuff that we've had in our history. If you run the universe again, what happens, right? So fluid mechanics is fluid mechanics, and that's an example I want to talk about. What's that? Yeah, just send off some jobs, right? Yeah. But what, which things will likely happen again? Language from smart organisms. What will happen when that emerges? How varied can these things be? So, and one of these great observations that we've made, and it's been made in physics in a hard quantitative way, is that you have lots of systems that end up looking the same macroscopically, right? The details don't matter. Leo Kadanoff is a very famous character here. He's at the University of Chicago who made a lot of advances in dynamical systems and bringing this framing into people's heads. Great examples. Central limit theorem. In terms of universality, it's not a dynamical system, but we can talk about a process of getting to it. This comes from a great range of things. It appears again and again and again. It's unavoidable. It has a universal quality to it, right? The Navier-Stokes equations for fluids, we derive them. We don't have a separate one for honey or a separate one and a separate one for air. We have different parameters, but it would be a priori, it could be that you have a separate, even if you've figured out that we have to have, that mathematics can work at all, you'd have to have a whole separate equation for honey, right? Which would be nuts. There are different approximations and all sorts of things that go into, studying fluids. Very hard, right? Phase transitions, we've talked a little bit about that. On and off, percolation, things exploding, all sorts of stuff. And then this is this story, right, of universality, many to one mappings. And it suggests that you're not necessarily going to get everything, everything you can imagine, all these aliens or whatever you want to think of, things might not all be possible, right? And so you're forced into certain kind of bottlenecks. So the question is how universal is universality, right? I mean, how many sorts of systems does it apply to? And what's sort of the long-term state of depends on what sort of scale you're looking at or what you're interested in, but you have things running around in essentially a 2D space on a planet. What are they going to end up as, or, in the fluids on a planet like fish? And an example that I've mentioned on and off and throughout the course is it is a success. I mean, it's a fantastic success in terms of thinking about complex systems. It's not framed that, it didn't have to be framed that way, but it really is, of course, because fluids are incredible systems. Again, micro to macro, repeatedly you get this, experiment plus theory plus simulation. So you're trying to do this everywhere, works in all these different places, maybe galaxies. But certainly, that's pretty odd, right? Equations that work for your own blood, for the Earth's mantle, very, very strange. And then, just to sort of show you where you can go with universality, you can even get to this, ball bearings on a lattice, right? So this is a strange thing. If you let little ball bearings run around on a 2D hexagonal grid, and you give them some collision rules, so if two of them hit each other and they're coming towards each other like this, then they either bounce off like this way or this way with a half-half probability. If you have four colliding like this, they can translate like this. These rules are figured out, and I'll explain a little more. If they hit, three of them hit like this, then they bounce off in this way, and there's some others. Yeah, so everything's all good, yeah? So if you do this, and this is just a weird kind of micro thing, you figure out how this looks from a distance. It looks just like the Navier-Stokes equations. So it's great for simulation because we love computers, right? Or we like them. We should say that. We like running things on computers. So this is good. I mean, you don't have to do everything like this, but this is a nice insight. We actually make something that never appears in nature because it actually reflects nature at a higher scale. But again, it's a universality story. Some really nice, fun math problems that have arisen. This is work that's been done a while back. There's actually the only lattice that works is the hexagonal lattice, which is, right? You can't, a square lattice from a distance, you'll see the squareness of it. You'll see its shape. So hexagonal lattices, if you've got a nice big honeycomb and you squish it, it feels actually like a solid. You can't feel it. If you had a thing that was trying to test to see if it, what underlying lattice there was, you can't see it. It would feel like a continuous shape, a continuous material, right? Whereas if it, and you shear it and try to do things like that, it behaves like a continuum. Whereas if you've got a square lattice, you can shear it and it will do funny things this way, different to what it will do in a different way, right? And like it'll squish this way, but not this way. So the only one that works is a hexagonal lattice. In 2D, in 3D there are none. So the way it's done is you find there's one in 4D, so you simulate it in 4 dimensions and then project it down. Because humans are crazy, right? But this is a universality is so it's such an odd thing that you can. There's all of the natural stuff that occurs, but now you can start to, of course, create systems that behave in a certain way. And for lots, this is just to produce something that's very real, fluids. Engineering of all sorts, you could, this is the sort of thing we're starting to do over and over again with some sort of like many agent systems where we make up some sort of, the atoms or the agents and they interact in some way and we try to produce some desired effect, like, people in society, right, with rules and laws and games. Okay. All right, so this is just to add because hexagons are cool. Good question, right? Is this actually just bees just accidentally sort of do this because hexagons are just so, right? Or is it, they're just piling in on top of each other so you get this kind of packing? Or is it, more deliberate, right? So there's some nice, do you guys know this is a very famous book? I mean, a lot of the things are not really right, and it's from a while ago, Darcy Thompson, great name, who was this sort of polymath character, zoologist, did all sorts of things. Beautiful book, really fun book, with lots of pictures, lots of stuff about optimization in biology. Right? Okay, see hexagons all over the place. This is fun. This is off of Ireland, right? So it's a cooling basalt, and you get hexagonal columna. You see it in drying mud, sort of thing. There are 6 and 7 and 5 and 8-sided things. What's that? So this was a volcanic that cooled, and you see all these. This is a real place. It's off of Ireland. It's
similar to double profile.
Yeah. So you can see these hexagonal. Do I have another picture? Yeah, you see these hexagonal shapes. It's cooled, and it goes the way it cracks or tends to. Just to say that hexagons appear a lot, and they're fun. Yeah. Actually, it would be much. It's for simulations of little things on lattices, hexagons are a much better thing to do because of this, feeling the shape of the internal shape. But it's a bit harder. We put everything on square lattices because that's, the matrix, right? Graphene is a huge thing now, right? So we figured out this is another way to put carbon atoms together. And Europe has put a ton of money. It's one of the 2 big flagship research enterprises for the next 10 years there. Well, at least for a few years. The other one is the brain. They're trying to reproduce the brain. Okay, let's see how that goes. I'll do something. This is chicken wire, right? So we figured out that's good for chicken wire. This is Blues Brothers, no? Right? 2 kinds of music, country and western. Okay, it's in front of them. Both kinds. Both kinds of music. Excuse me. Correct. You've seen this. That was fun. All right. So liquids. A lot of good liquids things. Okay. And I've mentioned this early on, but more is different, which is a great framing for us. And this is there's definitely a physics part to this paper, which about ammonium atoms and so on, which ammonium molecules, which might not be exciting to read, but it's funny to see this. It's an argument against saying that there's only really particle physics and the rest is just some sort of applied nonsense, which is how people used to think of themselves a lot. But as you go up through scales, there's symmetry breaking, right? Not every universe is sort of, everything is possible. And having this grand unified theory of the smallest things tells you really kind of nothing, actually, about what's higher up. Right? DNA is DNA, and it's not going to predict that, unless you have you need a very clever theory to get to that. There's a nice thing here, right? So that 2006 study, most creative physicists in the world. If you look at the way it was done, the claim was, or the approach was to look at the number of papers a person cited versus the number that cited them. And yeah, so he's a pretty potent character. So this is the structure, right? So elementary particle physics gives rise to solid state, many-bodied stuff, and then you keep going up and keep going up. Psychology gives you, I mean, this is the structure, right? Now it's not one of these scaling things at all. These are different games being played out, right? So we tend to make this mistake. We try to, we say we know how gluons and things fit together. Let's model humans in the same way, right? Very bad plan, okay. Yeah, and here it is, right? This is a good quote. The more we know about fundamental laws, the less relevance they seem to have very real problems of versa. This is sort of maybe obvious to everyone, but the physicists were running around thinking they were doing the only real science. And it draws you in. You think, okay, I've got to do that. Right? I've got to do string theory, otherwise my life is worthless. That's not true, right? But so scaling and symmetry breaking and so on, and this, you can't just build up from these simple things. And here's the thing going against universality, right, is just accidents of history, which is talked about in different ways. Path dependence is probably one of the better terms that you'll hear in economics. Not very good for making up terms. So this is, I don't need to say this. SORNet actually connects renormalization to the hierarchy, but it's not actually that at all, right? The rules are changing as you go up. Yep. Okay, so, and here's a nice, this is that paper, right? XKC deified, right? So everyone is just, this is sociology, it's just applied psychology, so they're all looking down on each other. There you are, you're a biologist with your octopus. Everyone's looking down, and then this is a fair point though, mathematicians are. It's generally true that pure mathematicians do not understand any of reality. They shouldn't talk about it, they're fine, but just don't.
Just go stay in your corner and have fun.
Just it's all good, but just let's not talk about reality. You can say some stuff about God existing, but just keep away. It's okay. Yeah. Just go back with your beard of wisdom, and yeah. But this is, here's our truth. This is a true thing. The physicists are quite happy about themselves. All right. So a theory of anything, right? It's not just about all the small stuff. It's about how things complexify, and you have these two big things going against each other, right? So when we get up to fluids, we're going to have the Navier-Stokes equations. That's it. We're going to have it. It doesn't matter how you got there. Whether you have gluons or not, fluids will be fluids. If you have something that gets that level, and then if you evolve some organisms to move around in that, and maybe it's a thin fluid, then they might have wing type things, or if they're fish shaped, right? You're not going to get cubes or giant sails trying to go through the water, unless they're flappy ones like manta ray, right? So there are these. That's a tension between these two things. There is a bit of a problem that's underlying all of this, is that we are all going to turn into a big soup, right? Entropy is always increasing. That is kind of bad. But it seems like evolution is sort of the big mechanism, right? So it's the driver of complexity. We get some stuff produced, planets and some sun stuff, right? Everything, that's raw physics, right? Raw, cold physics. It's just, and so a bunch of randomness happening on top of it. Things come out of, and this is a hard problem, right? Where did everything come from? But then we get to, evolution is sort of the advent of games, right? And algorithms, and it ratchets up from there. So, these are I'm just throwing these out as big, wild, difficult things, right? There are these big transitions. Big Bang is something we have some very vague understanding of. There's big randomness, where it's a big soup and mess. Eventually we get to life at some point, so there's big star making, I guess, should be in here. Replicate, life, evolve. This is right in the last few seconds of the history of the universe, right? We get to talk, we have language and stories for us, number, we have religion's a good thing. Big make, right? So industrial revolution, right? There's that transition. There are these big transitions. Big science, science is a new thing. Of course, now we're in this kind of world, right? I don't know, just for fun. Right? So how predictable are all these things? What's the chance that they happen, right? You're rolling your million-sided die, I guess your 10 billion-sided die, and you're like, no, the solar system is dead. there's more stuff to point to here, right? So why do things become more complex? That's what you can. This is from a while ago. As I said, complexification, sort of the evolution of algorithms, perhaps. Everything is kind of algorithms, is what this is. The story, right? Differential equations are kind of very hard, cold algorithm, right? Stories are some kind of algorithm, but sloppier and messier. So it should be a search for extraterrestrial algorithms. Okay. Okay, and that's a list of these things, right? Big Bang, we have randomness, somehow gets to replicating structures, which is a great mystery, the origin of life. And then we have evolution driving in various different ways, right? So now it's the socio-technocene is what I think we're in. This is the last thing. Good, okay. Again, something to improve, but there's this theory of anything, like why do things just keep building out, or is this just a completely unlikely event? This is a big, deep physics kind of problem, I think. And then we have this understanding around it. We have these hard stories, right, where we have differential equations and algorithms and so on that we really can explain these micro to macro stories. And then we're out into this boundary is pushing further and further out over time. It was way back here. Things that are clearly systems, but we can't necessarily describe them in hard ways like we can for fluids. Right. But all of them are in this. Okay. All right, so stories. Mention this one, I guess. Yep, good stuff. Evolution, right? So mechanisms for how things come about. Stories, of course. The zing for that one is also all financial analysis and more directly D&D, which was good. So I'll finish with this because I think stories are fun. Fun and incredibly important. Everything is basically stories. So the most common element on the disk, if you haven't read Pratchett, you should. Although not included in the list of the standard 5, Earth, Fire, Air, Water, and Surprise, which is his joke, ensures that everything runs properly as a story, right? A little narrativium goes a long way. Simple story, the better. Storytelling is the opposite of reductionism. 26 letters and some rules of grammar are no story at all. So it's a nice little thing. Heroes only win when outnumbered, and things which have a 1 in a million chance of succeeding often do so. Stories, right? Anyway, so we're at a great time, right? You guys are really in a great time for science and engineering and making things. There's just this great time to go and describe stuff. It's very much, back in the sort of Da Vinci era of things. Like, okay, let's just do stuff. It's great. And this is kind of, this is science. Describe what's going on, explain it. You have to find things that are meaningful, of course. Well, you don't have to, but it's not bad. And it may become meaningful after all or not. But and then don't be too excited about all the tools. I mean, I know that's what we try to do in science, like hand tools to each other. We have to. There are a lot of tools, but not everything is a scale-free network or a phase transition or a whatever it is. You see all these things that have worked well in different places, but so don't get too carried away. But describing, just keep describing. Okay, so that's good. This complex networks is next. If you want to sign up for that, that's awesome, and more of this. But it's about networks, and networks are everywhere. Okay.